The piece that I'm going to present today is based on my research that I conducted throughout my doctoral time. And so this is something that I found so like just I found the research and I found the information just so helpful that I have to share it and I have to just ask people to just put it inside their spaces. And so um, I looked at a couple of, you can go to the first slide. But so, how the research piece started is I looked at a lot of issues that were happening inside of classrooms. Now, although this is the university settings, it doesn't mean that the settings aren't full of diverse individuals. And so, the work piece started by looking at what's happening with individuals inside of classrooms that makes them one drop out, not want to go, not retain information, or just not feel connected to professors or teachers, that is continuing the rate of low education in Georgia, in Alabama, in the southern areas. And so I found, interestingly enough, it wasn't that the children or adults or pre-adults or adolescents or high schoolers were incapable of learning anything. It wasn't learning disabilities that were running high. It was actually their experience that they were having and their sense of not belonging. If I don't feel as if I want to belong there, if I don't feel as if like I feel connected and someone wants me to be there or wants me to like learn and they're excited, then I don't want to come either. And so like we found a trend within my like research and just like my time within my PhD program of just systematic issues related to that. The theme of belonging, the theme of feeling connected, the theme of feeling related to and heard was happening. And so therefore I've gone on this mission to not only teach the piece from a culturally like inclusive standpoint or responsive standpoint, but I also in leadership trainings talk about unconscious biases that are coming from our own self that actually continue to divide happening in classrooms, organizations, leaderships, and office spaces. And I use this exact framework to continue fueling it. And so I want to talk a little about what is culturally responsive teaching. It's a framework, I didn't invent it. It's a framework that was actually already out there. And so a couple of people have taken a dabble at it and saw some really, really high responses. And so culturally responsive teaching, it incorporates the students' cultural backgrounds, their experiences and perspectives. And so what I mean by that is literally just that. Your culture makes a difference as to how I'm going to approach you. Your background in which your culture is from, meaning your learning style, your communication style, your language, even to the food choices that you eat, to whom you respond to that is in a position of authority, how you respond to that person, how you relate to that person, everything about your culture, I'm going to take it into consideration. And I'm going to take those experiences that you've had within that culture. Now, how creative and how unique is that, right? Because when we think of like, we just got finished with like National Heritage Month, and we have all these historical months like Black History Month, Women's International Month. And then we kind of look at them in this like big frame. But when you look at it microly at each individual woman or each individual Hispanic and the food choices to the dance, I've been taking like salsa, not classes because I need to probably go to a class, but I've been taking salsa like out and I've just thoroughly enjoyed the family unit. I have been welcomed in so much, and I don't even know the moves. They're like, you got it, you got it. And just to come into the rhythm of that person and the rhythm of that culture and the music and the flow of it and the unity that's there, that's the culture. And to embrace myself and to come at a learning standpoint, I've in turn like picked up more dance moves. I like want to sign up for classes. Now I've become curious about the music. I'm like, well, what is this song saying? And because of that, is like, it's just, I feel like as if I'm now part of a new community. Now, that's very similar to cultural responsive teaching practices. Cultural responsive teaching practices moves you to a student and it says, how about you teach me something about you? And then from that piece, we work together. And so it's looking at the perspectives of that individual. So if you have diverse students from various ones, and I know sometimes it may feel very overwhelming, how am I going to learn like 25 cultures or 55 or 100, however many students? Well, something that I found in my research that was so, and I'll go more into it, that I found that was so profound that changed the scores of the children as well as grade level performance in the kids was the fact that this was student interest. It was student interest, and also it was so personable. And so I'm going to dial it back and talk about what my study was. And so you can see like how beneficial this was. So I did a femological study, and I conducted it on Black male educators in the Georgia public school classrooms. They were all from grades 3 through 12. And so in each person who was a part of the study had kids who were either 1 to 2 grade levels behind. And if we know anything about the system, that's challenging, especially working in the academia setting. That means that there's not going to be an increase within your like county of kids from that county who probably get into the schools. That makes a big difference. So if it's already a low performance and they're dropping out, they're least likely to come to college. And so that makes a big difference if you're already academically behind. You're just not motivated, you're not like interested, you're failing. And so each person actually had students who were behind before working with them. That was part of the criteria. Are you working with students? I need you to, if you've done something that you got a student and now their score is up and they're on grade level, please come to the study. And so they begin a grade to 2 behind. Now, this is like meaning like somebody may have been in the 5th grade and they were reading on 2nd grade level. So we're not talking about you're like on the 4th grade level. We're talking about you're in the phonics deficit. And so by using these culturally responsive practices, every student reached grade level by the end of the year. What was ironic about this is the teachers had no idea they were doing culturally responsive practices. That's what was so unique about this. Oh, and you can go to the next slide, please. They didn't know. So as I dove into the practices of what they were doing, this is where I pieced together what they were actually doing and how this was very culturally responsive. Each student, each teacher, during the interview process, I asked about where some of the kids' performance was. Is there something that you do unique with your students to ensure that they actually know the material? Teachers would often tell me that they stayed after school. Some said they sat and had lunch with the kids. Some said that they would actually take the time to go to football games if they had a student who was playing. The most unique thing I heard is that some high school male teachers actually said that to those students who had trouble processing and verbalizing some assignments, they would allow them to walk up to them and actually like repeat back some things using art, using music, using poetry, and using like even like musical beats. And they allowed them to actually like make sure they knew it. It just wasn't on the test score. And so they watched students like literally understand what was happening, get excited about coming to the classroom, and like literally like wanting to come to the class when it wasn't even their class. And all they were doing was actually being interested in the kids, going to their sporting with them, sitting down, talking to them. Most kids who are failing are mostly from like low socioeconomic, sometimes single parent homes. There's a lot of systematic things. Well, they found out that their role was so vital to those students that those kids were yearning for that time. They also saw that they needed to go back to do the grade that they missed and the current grade and maybe possibly the next grade. So they found very creative ways. And so the teachers would often look up different types of like learning material. Like if they had like STAR or they had some type of like programming, software programming, they actually may use what the school was using combined with some other ones that they found very effective that may have been more hands-on, more with manipulatives, more cultural-based ones. And so in culture-based, was very tailored to which individual needed what and what that individual man needed. Everybody didn't need to verbalize their answer. Everyone didn't need to like draw a picture. But those who may have had struggles with articulating their words or writing clearer sentences did extremely well if they were allowed to maybe do a performance during lunch. They did extremely well. They showed knowledge of actually learning maybe the history material. They showed knowledge of actually regurgitating it. And they showed knowledge of having like that comprehensive understanding. And so that was some of the positive things that came out of it. Now I have a kid, my kid, who's now 17, and just maybe like a year, not even a year ago, like we were getting some reports that maybe he has dyslexia, and he ended up not having dyslexia. But I later, like, we found out that he has language expressive disorder. Like, he literally has stuttering. And he's so fluent that you cannot tell he has stuttering. But what would happen, and sometimes with his like public education, is the teachers would say he had a meltdown. Like, he would get really quiet and he wouldn't answer you. And like, so they would think it was defiant. And really, like, he was like, the more anxious he gets, the more he gets quiet because the stuttering, and he's having trouble getting the sentence out. And so because he's so fluent, it's like, you're just being rude. You're not listening to me. But the more he got anxious, the more he went internally. And so we've had to move to some speech pathology and now move to some other ways that he can actually like show his understanding of some assignments. So one way that it affects him is like whenever there's like on his school now, he goes to like a school of fine arts. And when he goes to school now, like they may say, hey, we need you to correct this answer and we need you to explain it. Well, that's where he has the issue. He'll get the answer correctly, and then sometimes he'll get it incorrectly, and he can't explain how he got there. And so, and he's like, but I know that's the answer, and he's not cheating or anything like that. Well, that's where his processing is. So part of like just knowing him and learning his culture, he's from a single parent home, I'm mom. He's from a mom that like, we're very fluent in our conversation. There's lots of conversations happening. There's lots of being open and inviting. We cook together, like at all his sporting events. That is our culture. Our culture is very close-knit. So he's actually used to an individual pausing for a moment and maybe having a conversation, explaining it, asking him. So this is actually foreign to be able to have to type it out. So one thing that we're beginning to look at is, can he actually like maybe do a PowerPoint presentation? Can he actually like talk through a webcam and say what he needs to explain why he got that answer? And so that is a part of knowing a person's culture and making it more student-led, student interest. He's also an artist. He can probably draw you like a really big comic book of the story in science. The subject that he did well in, the most high, he actually was able to do PowerPoint presentations. He was actually able to do like drawings and things that he was creating in the STEM area. And so that is his student interest led. Culturally responsive practices is all about that. It's being able to take how that person is processing the person's culture into consideration, the person's needs, in order to ensure that they are actually getting the information and being able to thrive in that environment and also feel this sense of belonging and connection. And so that is what the males were doing. Again, they were taking the time to do very tailored things. And they still worked and this is public school, Georgia public school. So if you know anything about that, the classrooms are not small. They didn't isolate you. They didn't like pull you in small groups. They just took the time and they noticed that here's where these kids came in. And they will all tell me that they got the report of where the kid was prior to. And so they knew what they were academically behind on and what may have been the struggle. And they said they took the time to do an assessment early on so that they can kind of like look at, well, what is going on and what may be some areas that you're struggling with. And so reading and math were very top areas. I even had one teacher I remember saying to me that he spoke with the mom one-on-one about ways that they can partner together in order to help the kid's reading level. The kid was in 6th grade and he was on a 3rd grade reading level. And he said by the time the summer ended, the kid now was on a 5th grade reading level. And he had worked simultaneously with the mom, and he had told the mom strategies, how often she should read with them, what she should read, and what this should look like. And he stayed very involved and present over the summer. And so it was that personal relationship. I personally think that's what it was. It was the sense of belonging, sense of being present, as well as taking into consideration that was a single mom who had other kids, who was having a hard time academically trying to help all of her kids. And that's not even me knowing what her education level was. He just gave that example of how he actually saw such a drastic change. And so, with culturally responsive practices inside of the classroom, it's not exclusatory at all. It's very much inclusive. It's so inclusive that you're like a big mom to them, or uncle, or a big sister. It's so inclusive that the person is actually motivated by the fact that you took the time to find some interest within them. It's that inclusive. And because of that, we saw big changes again. They came from like 2 grade levels down to on grade level. And so it was open communication with families, members, like I was saying. It was like um, some of the teachers were actually like maybe the lead liaison for their school department. And so these are Black males. And so the percentage is pretty low within school systems, but they had actually taken on being like lead teacher. Or like my son has a history teacher now who's like over the diversity. He's actually over like the history lead. Like the males I saw had actually taken a lead to actually help oversee some of the particular areas. And that also showed very effective. And so we can get to another slide, please. All right. So looking at culturally relevant curriculum. So that's one thing. This is not saying throw your textbooks out, but this is saying when you find a story, how can you find culture within that story? When you find a reading literature, or when you find maybe a project within like environmental science or physics, how can you find culture within it? How can you actually make assignments based on who you have in the classroom? And so that was the game changer. The game changer was taking a look and noticing who's in the room. I have these, like when I do the full workshop about building an inclusive workspace, I have um, five particular like models as to how to build inclusive space. And one of those is to see the room. And I literally mean that, because when we get inside, sometimes the classrooms may be overwhelming. Sometimes we may even see some repeat people within our classrooms, or we just may see maybe the ones that are most verbal, or everyone's sitting back. So who may be the talkative one? Just whatever our eyes go to are kind of based on our biases a little bit as well. And so this invites you to see the room. Who am I working with? I have to know who am I working with so I can know what I actually need to do, and how do I tweak some of these assignments. Am I working with am I working with all women who are first generation? That means something. Not thinking that nothing about whom's in your classroom is like, it means nothing. It all means something. And so the culturally relevant material is actually tailoring it to who's in your room that year. So it may be different next year. This doesn't say that you can't stick with, again, some of the systems that are already in place. This says the style in which you deliver it was what those teachers did. Every teacher used the textbook that the public school has. Not one said they didn't. They used the textbook. They delivered it completely different, and they made sure that it was tailored to the individuals. That's what was different. Nobody came off of the curriculum or the agenda. And so this is making it relevant. So they use music, literature, and images of various cultures. They tailor lessons. They tailor students' life lessons. They help the student, because there's a portion within a Georgia milestone we have to show you can apply things. Well, you can't show you can apply unless you can understand like where it's even coming from or how we got somewhere. So they would use real life stories and maybe music and the culture and pop culture and whatever was happening with those students to actually help them to formulate stories to understand that piece. So that may have been using anime. That may have been using, like I remember some of the teachers said that may have been using the latest song. And they would use that storyline to help with the individual. They also use real life relevance. So oftentimes, because we are dealing with different generations, That is culture. Not forgetting what culture is. It's language, it's your role, it's your values, it's your food, it's your family background, it's the style of clothing you wear. It's all of those things. And sometimes we only try to look at culture as ethnicity and race and gender, but it's not. That's only like that's the first three or something. Looking at culture literally just as it is, it's everything about that individual and their family and their environment, and working from that standpoint. And that's what they did. And they used real life relevance. And so, some of the impact, like I mentioned before, is the Black male educators help students see themselves in the curriculum. That's the disconnect. If I can't see that this has anything to do with me, how many times have we been in a math class and we're like, am I ever going to use this? And so like, or, and they're like, you're really not. They have calculators for that, or they have phones now. And so like, no, that people are losing where they see how that's relevant. But every day there's some form of math in us, to be honest. Every day there's some form of science within us. I just had a doctor's appointment earlier, and I had to understand what my numbers meant, these levels meant, how to talk to the physicians. That's science. Actually, every day we're using everything. But the disconnect is we don't see that because it's not relevant, and it doesn't appear relevant. And so therefore, since it's not, we're creating more of a divide, and dropouts happen, distractions happen. Like, we're easily persuaded that someone can come along in a big company where we really needed an educational foundation, and they can just woo us over, swoop us off our feet. And so it's because the kids are not seeing it as relevant. And so culturally responsive leadership practices invite you to move that relevance in and take time for that actual like sense of belonging and connection. And so next slide, I think I'm just about done. So, yeah, so pretty much it was a lot of building trust and empathy. In building that, it says be aware of personal cultural biases and work toward adapting the students' diverse perspectives. So I want to like touch on that very briefly. Whenever we enter with any of our own unconscious biases, I even have biases, and they creep up very quickly. Our biases are another way of saying our own belief systems. When we come from various backgrounds, we enter with the bias of, here we go again, an all male class. Here we go again. Like, I got these Gen Zs. I got like, here we go again. They don't really listen. So those are our own biases. Our biases actually come from our own culture. So the more cultural we are aware of our own selves as the leaders, as the educators, as the parents, as the community advocates, the more we're able to like invite that conversation in the room and be able to talk more about it so that we can actually build more inclusive spaces that are more connecting. Everyone is looking for a sense of belonging and connection. That's one common theme. It's like all like that whole theme about we're all really looking for love thing. Like, we're all really looking to belong. I don't know too many individuals that safely, without some type of anxiety or fear, they're saying that they don't want some type of relationship. And so we're looking for that sense. And so the people that we instruct also want that, even if they come in and they're anxious or they're dismissive or they're quiet, getting to know their cultural background may play a role in that. And so differentiate instruction was what those guys saw that part was helpful. Some of the kids actually were going to work as young teenagers because they had to. So they may have been tired. So the kid sleeping or the kid joking off had a very, very low reading and math level, and it had nothing to do with they really didn't want to learn. It had everything to do with peers, feeling like like low confidence. And so when they paused to talk to them one-on-one a lot, when they paused to ask a couple of questions and pull them to the side, they saw a drastic difference, and they saw a sense of openness happen. And so incorporating those various styles, visual, auditory, collaborative work, when to do a group assignment, there's actually an art in that in psychology about whom works well together. I do like a teaching on like birth order, and there's actually an art between like our oldest works very well with the youngest kid, middle children work very well together, only children work very well with younger kids. And so you can do great psychological groupings together just using who's an only child in the room and make some really great group assignments. But that's going to take asking some questions about them, getting to know some of the kids, and not just kind of moving on with the assignment. And then promoting an inclusive, equitable classroom. You can't do equitable without a differentiated or without understanding where they are or without interest based or student led or making it personable, or it's going to stay all over the place. So the goal was not to say, I'm not going to teach you what's going on. That's equitable. Everyone gets to learn what we're learning. What we're going to do differently in order to make sure is we're going to learn it how you need to learn it. But we're all going to learn this. No one is going to be left behind. And they found great success in that. Yeah. Do I have another slide? Let's see. Probably not. Okay, so that I actually did it. So are there questions in the chat or later? And so, yeah.
No questions? I got a question.
Yes.
I thought, well, first thing, it was a lot of information. I thought it was really great. I really like your research on Black educators here in Georgia. Yeah, knowing that a lot of teachers aren't doing this deliberately, but they are assessing culture. They don't know they're doing it, but they are assessing the culture of their children. But now, after they talk to you or having understanding of this, and now that they're deliberately trying to assess the culture of each individual student in the classroom, do you think there's it's shortened the time of them doing it deliberately to kind of understand who's who needs a little bit more attention and understanding their cultures?
Yeah, I definitely, the Black males that were part of the study, they didn't know that that's what it was called, but they intentionally were trying to get to know them to do those things in order to raise the levels. They didn't know that it was called a name. They just were like, well, this is what we're doing. And so my later proposal of the study was to hire more Black males who actually can help teach this practice into like all of the classrooms. And so like that is where I'll continue on with the study as to like they had it. They actually, the kids did better. And they didn't know that they were actually doing a particular study. They didn't know. They were just like, this is what we're doing. It's like, well, let's teach other people the same exact thing that you just did that made a drastic change.
No, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another thing that you had hit was about the relevancy of the topics that they're teaching. That I think that the relevancy does make sense, right? Because as a student, why do I need to learn math if I have a calculator? I have my phone that has a calculator. Why do I need to learn how to write if I got Chat GPT that can write it for me?
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So I think like that, and that's how like we're moving away from their culture because like, and we're like, because you do, or you have to apply it, or because you're gonna have a comprehensive exam, or you're gonna have this Georgia milestone, and it's just like they really truly need to know why. Why is this relevant? How is this relevant?
You might be in a job
important
application.
at all. Oh, sorry. I said that's important at all levels, higher education as well. What you're talking about applies in so many different contexts. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Thanks. I thought so too. And I was like, this is like, yeah, like I said, I have a 17-year-old and I have to like have very personal centered conversations, connect it back and expose him also. And that was one thing I didn't mention. Some of them took field trips. Like they were really like I said, without them knowing that this was a culturally responsive leadership practice, not one of them knew that they were actually doing a framework.
That's even better. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, this is a style, you know that, like, this is a thing. Yeah.
Well, I think we've hit the time. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, sorry.
No, we've hit we're at 3:31 now. So I'm sure the other people are going to be coming in for another session. So, thank you, Dr. Bryant, for your presentation, and thank you all for attending. I'll say this too. Please be sure to complete the conference evaluation. I'll put the link in the chat for you to gain access and use after the conference. And enjoy the rest of the ADEIL conference, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.